Since it's that time of year, I thought it would be fun to talk about the Olympics. There are two kinds of Olympics, one in the summer and one in the winter. And I'm going to be talking about the one in the summer, since that's the one that's happening right now. I'm not very sporty, so I haven't really been keeping track of the Olympics as much as probably other people have, but I did not know that there were this many sports in it. Seriously, if you just Google, is blank an Olympic sport, the answer will most likely be yes. And while I was searching up if random sports are Olympic sports, apparently bowling is not one of them. If I was in charge of picking out sports to be in the Olympics, which I don't think is a one-person job, but hypothetically, bowling would definitely be on the top 10 list. A sport that is an Olympic one is horseback riding, which raises the question, if the rider wins, then does the horse get a reward too? Because I think it should. It would only be fair since the horse is the one doing all the running. Also, when doing some research, apparently boxing is an Olympic sport, which for some reason I thought it wasn't, because maybe too violent, I guess. For most other sports, when someone wins, they step up on the podium and they look all happy, and they're holding the medal and stuff, but in boxing, it wouldn't really be as photo-worthy if blood is spilling from your ears and nose. Although apparently, the sporting events and the accessories used in them are very high-tech. For example, in fencing, both people wear special armor that detects where they get hit so they can more accurately keep score, which definitely helps because then someone doesn't have to be looking through binoculars counting every single hit. And it prevents any cheating, unless, of course, the thing malfunctions or something. But that shouldn't happen. Although a sport with a less subtle impact that involves sharp sticks is jousting, which is not an Olympic sport for some reason. Although there is an entire category for horse-involved sports. So how come jousting isn't one of them? And because of the fact that jousting originated in England and the Olympics originated in Greece, they aren't too far away from each other. So in the earliest days of the Olympics, it's kind of surprising that the two didn't just meet up one day and say, hey, wanna be an Olympic sport? And even if today Olympic sport chooser people decide that jousting is maybe too violent and dangerous, then it's still, they didn't have that kind of safety concerns way back then, so it's kind of surprising that it was never an Olympic sport. But really, that was just me rambling on about something no one cares about. Speaking of something that apparently little people cared about, baseball was dropped as an Olympic sport in the early 2000s. But luckily, it was reinstated this year in 2020 Olympics. So, was it re-added just to inflate the new sports count this year? Possibly, considering that they have 5 new sports in the Tokyo 2020 Olympics this year, which actually 2020 was last year, but due to setbacks, 2020 is this year, apparently. So I guess those people who said that 2020 felt like 2 years were actually right. Anyway, those 5 new sports were baseball, softball, which, as stated before, are coming back from previous cancellation, I guess. Karate, which I thought was already in there, but apparently not. Skateboarding, which, again, I thought that was already an Olympic sport, but whatever. As well as sport climbing, which is, I guess, rock climbing, but more sporty, and surfing. Again, surprising, considering when you think of summer, generally think of surfing. So it would only make sense that the Summer Olympics would have surfing. So now that all the most popular and well-known sports are in the Olympics, at least most of them, I think it's time that they start adding some real oddballs in there, just for fun. I personally think that freeze tag would be a good choice. Actually, now that I think about it, freeze tag would be more appropriate in the Winter Olympics. Anyway, this has been Billy Nacho's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. A little while ago, I talked about Doom 64, and I said that I wanted to eventually talk about some of the other Doom games. But for the first 2 Doom games, there's not really much to talk about. You run around, you find keys, you shoot stuff, that's pretty much it. So instead, I'm going to be answering one of the most yearning questions in video game history. Is Doomguy left-handed or right-handed? Now, if you've only played one of the 3 most recent Doom games, Doom 3, 2016, and Eternal, then you probably think I'm an idiot right now. Obviously, he's right-handed. However, in Doom 1 and Doom 2, it's a bit more debatable. So, to settle this, let's look through every single weapon in the first two Doom games. See how many he holds with his left hand and how many he holds with his right hand. So, the weapons that you start the game off with before you collect any of the others are the pistol and the brass knuckles. For the pistol, you can obviously see that he's holding it with his left hand. As with the brass knuckles, they're on his left hand, and he punches forward with his left hand. So these two aren't really much up for debate. So right off the bat, that's 2 points for the left side. The next weapon you'll unlock in the game is the shotgun, which he holds the trigger part with his right hand and the pumping thing with his left hand. And as a right-handed person, or squirrel, that is how I would hold a shotgun. So 1 point for the right side. Now the next weapon you find is the chain gun. And unfortunately, the chain gun is so big that in-game you only ever get to see the very front of it. And you can't see his hands on it at all. So it doesn't count. But if you want to count every single weapon, then there is another character who uses the chain gun called the heavy weapons guy. This enemy holds it with his right hand. So if you want, you could give a point to the right, but I'm going to keep it neutral. The chain gun doesn't count since we can't see Doomguy's hands on the weapon. Next up is the rocket launcher, which has the same problem as the chain gun. It's so big that you only ever get to see the muzzle of it. And, unfortunately, unlike the chain gun, no other enemies use this weapon. So, another one that's uncategorizable. Fortunately, our next weapon is actually going to be counting for something. The chainsaw is held with his left hand on the little bar on top that you hold for stability, and his right hand is at the bottom, near the revving switch. So it's safe to assume that it is right-handed. Up next, we have the plasma rifle. Now, at first glance, you may think this is just like the other two, where you can only see the muzzle, and it won't count for anything. But, after firing the weapon, and when you stop shooting, it does a little kickback animation. And in that animation, you can see that his left hand is on the front part of the gun, meaning that he's holding it with his right hand. So that's another point to the right. Now this next one is where things get tricky. The super shotgun is held with his right hand. But after you shoot it, and he does the reload, you can see that he loads it with his left hand. And he loads it very, very fast. Like, unrealistically fast. So it's pretty obvious that his left hand is a lot more dexterous than his right hand. So, and this is debatable, I'm going to give the super shotgun to the left side. The final weapon that I saved for last, because it's really underwhelming, is the Bfg Bio Force Gun, not the other thing. And this weapon is actually pretty cool. It has a backpack thing, so you wear it like a forward-facing backpack, which doesn't require any hands, so it doesn't fall into any of our categories. Great, that's all the weapons in the classic Doom games. Let's just look at our score, and oh, great, it's a tie. So does that mean that Doomguy is ambidextrous? No, we still have more things to categorize. The in-game Doomguy sprite itself does not change depending on what gun you're holding. Instead, the whole time he's just holding this unnamed rifle-looking thing. And he holds that unnamed rifle-looking thing with his right hand, so that's a point to the right. Also, on the box art for Doom 2, we can see our hero facing a cyber demon holding a shotgun. And where is he holding that shotgun? On his right hand. Also, similarly, on the cover art for Doom 1, he's holding that unnamed rifle thing while facing a horde of monsters. And he's holding that unnamed rifle thing on his right. And in this picture, at the end of Doom 1, which you can't really see much of since I had to censor all the blood, but he's holding the shotgun in his right hand, but he's also holding the head of his pet bunny, Daisy, in his left hand. And I personally think that Daisy is more important to him than any old shotgun. So he would probably be holding her head in his dominant side so that he can keep a better grip on it and not lose it. So, and this again, not a very factual-based assumption like the super shotgun, but I think this is a point to the left. And so there's our final scores. Doomguy is indeed right-handed. However, most of the left-handed weapons he gets are at the very beginning of the game. So, for some reason, he gets progressively more right-handed as the game continues. Strange, but fun fact, I guess. This is probably going to be the last Doom-related rant I do in a while, but I hope you found it at least somewhat interesting. And if you're a Doom fan with an instance in the classic games where he holds something with his left or right hand that I missed, please inform me. I'm very curious to see if that would change the tides at all. Anyway, this has been Billy Netch's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Today is a very happy day for animals, because giant pandas, which are the black and white ones, are no longer on the endangered species list. They're now categorized as vulnerable, which, hooray, that's better than endangered, but still not good. I'd say pandas are currently on a C- in terms of living. They aren't quite failing, but they're not really thriving either. Part of the reason why there are more pandas is that now there's more food for pandas, as people are planting more bamboo, which is the thing that pandas pretty much exclusively eat. Pandas also eat eggs too, apparently, which I didn't know. So, pandas are really close to being herbivores, but not. So if anyone says that pandas are vegans, you can respond with, well, actually, they eat eggs too. On second thought, that may not be quite a good idea, because people who correct others with, well, actually, are usually not very polite. So maybe you could phrase it a different way. Like, are you aware that pandas also eat eggs? Oh wait, no, that's just as bad. Or, sometimes, in the wild, pandas also eat eggs. Yeah, that's better. Back on topic of the whole extinction thing, being classified as vulnerable, isn't that kind of, like, just another way to say endangered? For example, you could say, I am vulnerable to getting sick in the winter. Or, I'm in danger of getting sick in the winter. It's kind of the same thing, although danger is a little bit more severe. So, it would make sense that it's one danger category above vulnerable. I'm very fortunate that I am a squirrel and not a panda, because if I were a panda, then I'd have to be a lot more careful to not go extinct. Squirrels, they don't have to try at all to not be extinct. There's so many of them. Although there are some species of squirrels that are more endangered than others, which brings up the question, what kind of squirrel am I anyway? Well, if we're going to get scientific, I guess I would say that I'm a brown squirrel. I don't know. It seems that most squirrels are named by where they live or the color that they are. So, sure, I'm a brown squirrel. This has been Billy Netch's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Yesterday morning, something weird happened on Scratch. That being, Scratch no longer looked like Scratch. It looked like this. What was once colorful buttons on a white background is now plain text links on a white background. And obviously it's not supposed to look like this. But the weird thing is, only the home page was like this. When I clicked on the messages category, it looked just like normal. This was fixed in about an hour or two, so it wasn't that big a deal, and some people didn't even see it. But imagine how unfortunate new Scratchers were that joined during this time. They would just see this and immediately be turned off the website, which is very sad. I mean, I wouldn't want to hang around here too long. It looks like one of those websites that the teachers would assign you for a research project that don't look very professional, and you probably shouldn't be on it, but you have to be on it because that's what the teacher assigned. Some people might be wondering, why did this happen, and how did this happen? But I'm pretty sure the most logical explanation is that someone at the Scratch team accidentally hit the remove graphics button from the homepage. Where did you come from?
Oh, I was just hiding behind that graphic of yours. Surprisingly, quite comfortable. But anyway, I came here for one specific thing. I want my monkey back. He's been missing for at least 6 episodes now, and it's getting quite lonely.
But he's been doing such a good job making sure my show doesn't get interrupted.
Did I not just interrupt the show a few moments ago?
Well, yeah, but you were hiding behind a graphic. Nobody checks behind those.
Okay, you fuzzy scoundrel. I will be back, and I will not leave without Chuck Monkey in my possession, for I am almost positive he enjoyed being in my laboratory more than being on your show.
Anyway, this has been Billy Netch's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. What is the worst thing to happen while watching a show? Is a question you've probably never been asked before, but I just asked right now. Could it be a sad part? A betrayal of some sort? Well, kind of that second one. Because I think the worst thing to happen while you're watching a show is to have the final episode be a cliffhanger. This usually happens when the people behind the show think, yep, I'm pretty sure that whatever company that's producing this will allow us to make another season so we can finish up the story. But then that doesn't happen. and now we're just left with nothing. So, to any aspiring show writers out there, here's a quick tip: don't do that. And what's even worse is when a non story driven show ends on a cliffhanger. There was no point of taking that risk, but they took it anyway, and now we're left with an incomplete product. Where I've noticed this happen the most is Netflix original series. Is that the plural of series? I don't think it is, but whatever. Almost every single Netflix original series I've watched doesn't have a proper ending. Because, yet again, I'm sure the show writers are like, yep, I'm pretty sure Netflix will approve us for a second season, and then, nope, doesn't happen. Usually because the ratings aren't like high enough or something. Because I'm sure Netflix decided not enough people watch this show. I'm sure no one will miss it. Well, guess what? The people who do watch that show will miss it. Having the viewers be left in the dark about what happens afterwards, or have it explained in some social media post from one of the show's creators, isn't as satisfying as actually watching it play out. And of course, obviously, it's not just Netflix who does this, but I've had the most experience with being disappointed by the endings of Netflix shows than any other media provider. Is that the term? Thankfully, this isn't a problem on places like Scratch or YouTube. I'm my own boss. I get to decide when things start and end. And I don't really want to end this show soon, or maybe even at all. But if or when this show does eventually end, it won't be on a cliffhanger. Someone write that down. Mark my words, it's important. And now that I've talked about shows ending on cliffhangers, obviously, I'm not going to do that. That would be like using the robot effect. Unthinkable. And also, I'm not sure if I've said this before, but I guess I'll restate it. Now that I've talked about almost every single aspect of Scratch, I'm going to be moving on to just talking about stuff that more wide audience of people will care about, like what I just talked about now. So, look forward to that. And with that being said, this has been Bill and Netch's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Since everything on Scratch is so easy to do, then there's really not a reason your game shouldn't have sound effects if you have a microphone. So here are some tips on how to make interesting sound effects. Most sound effects I make come from a flexible metal desk lamp. All you need to do to make a nice sound effect is take the lamp or other metallic object and punch it. Yeah, kinda like that. Except, raccoons aren't desk lamps. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hello, mysterious person who doesn't like me for some reason. I'm assuming you came here because you want Chuck Monkey to be your friend again. Well, he's sitting over there guarding, so why don't you go talk to him?
Well, maybe I will. How do I keep getting on your show if he's supposed to be preventing people from interrupting you?
Maybe he just likes you.
Good. I too am a fan of myself. Monkey, I would like to apologize for my actions towards you, even though you are annoying. Well, if you really want me back, then why don't you address me by my first name? Alright, fine. Charles Monkey, would you? That is not my name. Alright. Charlie Monkey, would you? That is still not my name. Chuck Monkey, you are the most annoying person I have ever met. Ah, that's all I needed to hear. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to that lab of yours.
I do not understand their friendship, but I mean, if it works, then I guess it just works. I haven't done one of these in a week. Now, if you ask probably anyone else who does animation why they haven't posted something in a week, they'll probably say something along the lines of, animation is so hard and takes so long. You're lucky I give you one thing a month. You are the most ungrateful person on the planet. That's what a person who does animation on YouTube or professionally on Scratch would say. But if you ask me, hey, how come you haven't posted a thing in a week? I'll say, because I'm lazy. I really have no excuse to not be making these things daily or every other day, except maybe for the fact that I can't think of anything to talk about, but there's a lot of things to talk about. For example, on Scratch a few days ago, or maybe yesterday, a featured studio called If I Were a Blank got Doom Squared, which I thought was pretty funny. So here's the studio when it got Doom Squared on the left, and on the right is the original image for the studio. It's pretty funny that they look so similar. The original image was just a little more pretty. This was most likely a coincidence, but it brings up a valid point. If you don't want your studio to get Doom Squared, take it into your own hands and pre-square it. If everything's a doom square, then things being replaced by doom squares wouldn't even be noticeable. So yeah, anyway, the real reason that I haven't made an episode in so long is just because there wasn't really anything notable to talk about. Actually, never mind, there has been some important Scratch news recently. The Scratch team have made a new YouTube video called How to Make a Mouse Trail. In the video, they show how to make a mouse trail. Never would have suspected that. Anyway, it's been a slow week. This has been Billy Nutch's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. It's September, which means school has started. Now, in my personal opinion, I think school is fun, for the most part. I'm lucky enough to have nice teachers where most of the homework they assign is just finish what we did in class, which I always do. And this show has been going on for over a year, so last September, I also talked about school somewhat. I think maybe it was tests or something. So it might be interesting to go back on that one and compare it to my thoughts on school from this one. Personally, though, I never go back on my old stuff, because the way I see it, if I don't remember talking about a thing, then I must not have talked about it well enough. So, talk about it again. Recycling old concepts and you don't even realize it. That's because you don't remember stuff from a year ago. Does that make me a particularly bad person? No, everyone does it. Another show that's long running, although admittedly way longer than I have, but The Simpsons reuses concepts all the time, but you don't realize it because it's probably been a long time since you've watched the last episode that did that thing. Though that's not really a fair comparison, because The Simpsons is a professionally developed comedy show, while Billy Nut Joe is, well, Billy Nut Joe. And also, some people might say that The Simpsons reuses concepts because modern episodes are getting lazy. I never actually understood the whole hating modern things and over-exaggifying how good the classic things were. Although, it kind of makes sense, because if something's been going on for a long time, then eventually it'll get stale, like bread, especially if it's episodic and not plot-driven. I try my best to get around this by having the entirety of Billy Nut Joe's rant be improvised. You'll never know what's coming next, because I don't know what's coming next. However, the drawback to that is that sometimes there are long periods where I can't come up with anything, and you don't get an episode for a week. And the classic versus modern thing, it's pretty obvious that this show has improved over time. And if I could do a picture-in-picture showing of the first episode, which Scratch doesn't have the ability to do, then I'm sure you could draw that comparison. Anyway, wow, what was I talking about before? I actually don't remember. Oh yeah, school. I don't even know. I wasted all my brain power for today on that rambling. But hey, that gives you a better incentive to not look back at the older episodes. So I guess this did turn out in my favor. Anyway, thank you for being here and putting up with my off-topicness. This has been Billy Nutch's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Recently, there was an update to Scratch, which means by law, I have to talk about it. What is this update I was not aware of, is probably what you're thinking. Well, it's a studio update. The last time there was a studio update, it was incredibly controversial, so let's hope that this one's a little better. Luckily for us, though, there's almost no way this could be controversial. All the update does is allow you to transfer ownership from one person to another. Ownership of a studio, that is. Which is just, okay, sure. See, it's possible to have an update to something without removing half of it. And speaking of removing half, what are you doing here?
Oh, don't worry about me. I'm just here to enjoy the show. Your friend has taught me a lot about how to stand respectfully next to a person without interrupting. However, she did not show me how to make thought bubbles appear in the center of the screen that display your thoughts. But that's probably a more advanced technique.
Well, I guess you're not the only person with superpowers then. Speaking of superpowers, since we have some extra time, I thought I'd remind you of the most important superpower of all, being kind to people. So, why don't you go do a kind thing right now? That's a fun activity people partake in often, I'm sure.
Oh, I am so going to get her. There can only be one person in this town with impressive abilities, and that's me.
Well, I guess that's an example of how not to be kind to people. This has been Billy Nutch's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. I've solved another one of the most biggest mysteries about Scratch. I know that's a bold claim to start the day with, but also, wait, most biggest mystery about Scratch? I don't know if that's proper grammar, but it doesn't matter. Jelly's not here. Anyway, if you've ever loaded a project on Scratch before, then you've seen the loading screen. It's got that animation of the blocks connecting to each other, and at the bottom it says a bunch of random text, which I'm almost entirely sure are completely random. The words that are being displayed have nothing to do with what the project's actually loading. So if you ever feel bad about putting a fake loading screen in your project, just remember, Scratch already has a fake loading screen for every project. Anyway, among those loading screen texts is one that has perplexed people for years. The text in question reads, "Inflating Gobos." Now, we all know who Gobos is, that Scratch mascot that looks like a yellow stain, but after all these years, no one can understand why the loading screen says that they're inflating them. What does that mean? Well, here's your answer. The Spanish word for balloon is globos. So really, it's saying inflating balloons, but they replaced globos with gobos because they sound similar. Get it? That's the joke. That's a pretty terrible joke, Scratch. And it's even worse that it took this long for someone to figure it out. Also, it implies that Gobo is not actually a character, more so a resource, and new ones have to be inflated each time another project is created, so that they don't run out of Gobos. Is a sad story for a sad joke on a terrible loading screen. Anyway, I hope I've enlightened you. This has been Billy Nacho's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed.